Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Ms. Campbell, would you call the roll for us?
Mr. Hannigan?
Here.
Mrs. Hines?
Here.
Mr. Derman?
Here.
Mr. Loop?
Here.
Mr. Harrell?
Here.
Mr. Nation?
Here.
Mr. Jeter?
Here.
Mrs. Seeley? Mrs. Drucker? Mr. Betancourt?
Here.
Mr. Womack? Mr. Hersey?
Here.
Mrs. Mullet? Mr. Kuzan?
Here.
And Mrs. Belisario?
Thank you very much. Would you please rise for the invocation and pledge, which will be led by Mr. Jack Loop.
O eternal God, bless all our schools of this parish, that they may be lively centers for sound learning, new discovery, pursuit of wisdom. Grant that those who teach and those who learn may find you to be the source of all truth. Be present with us as we pray this evening, and guide us in our deliberation, for that all that we may do for the common good and the glory of your name. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Loop. Again, I'd like to welcome you to our November 1st Human Resources and Education meeting, and we'll go right to our agenda. We did not have, well, first of all, do we have any visitors anyone would like to recognize? Ms. Mullet?
I'd like to recognize James Bro, who's running for school board.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Mr. Hannigan?
I'd like to recognize Matt Green and Robert Brewer, who are both residents.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll go on to our next item, which is persons requesting time on the agenda. We did not have anyone sign up, so we'll move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes from the committee as a whole meeting held on October 4th, 2018. Do I have a motion? I have a motion from Mr. Kuzan to accept those minutes. Do I have a second? A second from Mr. Hersey? Thank you very much. Do we have any comments from board members regarding those minutes? Do we have any comments from the public? If not, then we'll go ahead and vote. Ms. Campbell, can you cue up the machine for us, please? All right. We're good? The minutes are approved by a vote of 12-0. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item, which is under instruction, and it is STOPS grants, and we have Ms. Stein to give us a presentation.
Okay, good evening, board members, Mr. Foles. I'm happy to present some good news to you all tonight and how we are working together to stop school violence. So the Stop School Violence Act was passed in March, 1 month after the Florida school shooting. So the act stands for Students, Teachers, and Officers Preventing School Violence. And what the act did was create $50 million in funding for schools to train people in how to prevent school violence. So we applied and we were awarded 2 grants, the mental health training and the threat assessment training. For the category 4 that we qualified based on our population, the funding ceiling was $250,000. And as you can see, we were one of 16 awards nationally in that category. And we were awarded $249,775. And one of two in Louisiana. And we were also awarded the second grant. So we were one of 12 awarded nationally, and we were one of the 6 in our state. So very exciting news. And so what these 2 grants will allow us to do, the timing for these grants is obviously perfect timing, because we do have full-time mental health providers in all of our schools and school resource officers who will help us to fully implement these programs. We are partnering with Sandy Hook Promise, who they are a national nonprofit organization. They were formed by the parents of children who died in the mass shooting from Sandy Hook Elementary. They created evidence-based programs, and they have trained 3.5 million people in their Know the Signs programs. We're going to be able to implement all 4 of their programs. One of the 4 programs is Start with Hello. Again, all of these programs are evidence-based, and they've been utilized nationwide. Start with Hello is a program designed to teach children how to develop all-inclusive communities and cultures, school cultures. So preventing school violence starts on a very basic level of including people and increasing their sense of belonging and decreasing that sense of isolation. So Start with Hello. The second program is Say Something, and this is teaching our youth how to recognize signs, especially in social media, and when they see things in social media that we seldom get to see, but they'll know how to recognize these things, and they'll also learn what to do and who to tell. The signs of suicide. This is a very important program. It's a very simple program. It's age appropriate. And it's, again, designed to teach how to recognize the signs and how to get help. And as we all know, many times school shootings start out as someone who is suicidal and then escalates to another level. And then finally, the 4th program, Safety Assessment and Intervention. This is training for all of our administrators, staff, adults, counselors, everyone, to increase their ability to assess threat and know the appropriate interventions. Dr. Cornell is a forensic psychologist. He developed this program, and our threat assessment process that we've been using, for over 10 years or more, is based on his Virginia student threat assessment guidelines. So we're already utilizing a lot of this program, so it will be a nice fit as well. So we're very, very excited to have this grant. Our next steps, we are participating in a webinar with the national representatives from Sandy Hook next week to discuss implementation and timelines and our performance and compliance measures. So that is it. Questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. Let's see what questions board members have. Mr. Betancourt?
Thank you, Ms. Hines. You mentioned age appropriate for the suicide studies. How young do we expose these children to that?
It wouldn't be any younger than middle school or junior high school, and we'll be discussing that more next week in terms of how we want to do it in our school system, but it's designed for no younger than middle school.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Derman?
Thank you. The information is, wonderful. The fact that we're getting some additional funding towards these causes that are near and dear to all of our heart. But a question about the funding with the SROs is that for training for those individuals or actual help to supplement the cost of having them there?
It's all for the training.
Okay. And, because I was just curious, and I know it's a struggle for, our law enforcement agencies to supply us SROs because of the additional amount of training that's needed for them beyond just being a regular policeman. So I was just curious if it was actually covering salaries or additional training and helping in that regard. So appreciate it.
Mr. Nation?
Thank you, Mrs. Heinz, and thank you and all those that did the hard work on putting this grant together, and we're very appreciative that Congress, made this money available to school systems around the country. The question I've got, and maybe you said it and I missed it, is we get $500,000. Is that an annual? Is it a one-time thing, or is this what is the life cycle of this funding?
It's 3 years.
Okay.
It's a
Is it
3-year
$500,000 per year or $500,000 for the 3 years?
No, for the 3 years.
So it's
a
okay.
total, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board members have any questions?
Ms. Hines, if I could, before Ms. Stein leaves, I'm not going to let her leave the podium without also, and I know Jeannie Bauer and Regina would say the same thing, Janelle was so instrumental in helping make sure all these MHPs are in place at the start of the year. There's no way we could have done it without her guidance and expertise in our system. The media and a lot of others have covered all the SROs, and those are certainly important. But I truly believe that the mental health providers in long term will be just as important, and getting those in place over the summer and making it happen at each school doesn't happen without her work, so I appreciate that as well. So.
Thank you.
Ms. Stein, I think there's one more question. Mr. Loop has another
I'm sorry,
question.
it was not, would it be possible for you to come back once we decide exactly how in the schools, who's going, how we handle it at the schools, and give us that type of rundown on what exactly is being done? And once I see, well, you have to go through the process and so on. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. I was going to add that in my remarks. I know that we do some threat assessment in our schools now, but I think these programs will be a great addition to the ones that we already have in place. And kudos to the staff for the work that it takes to write these grants and get it all together. We're very pleased. Dr.
And one
Sanford?
final piece of this, anytime that you have a federal grant of this magnitude, you have to have in-kind matching funds. So the fact that the district has resources such as Janelle, such as Robert Donald, such as SROs and mental health providers in our schools currently, we were able to show in-kind contributions to achieve this grant, and that was
That's great.
monumental.
Well, I appreciate that, knowing that. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is an accountability report, and we have Dr. Sanford for that.
Good evening, board members. It is my pleasure to be with you tonight to bring some good news and to set the stage for what's coming next week. So I want to talk briefly tonight about district accountability and the upcoming changes. So if you recall, we had quite a shift in the accountability formula. So last year, in accountability, we had 100% of the score coming from the LEAP test. If you notice on your screens, you will see that this year that is changing. There is a new component, and it is called student progress. So 75% from that standardized achievement measure and 25% from student progress. In the 8th grade level last year, 95% came from the standardized measure and 5% from DCAI. DCAI is Dropout Credit Accumulation Index. That translates into the number of credits that the student earns by the end of the 9th grade. So all schools with an 8th grade configuration on their campus fall under that category. And the last is the 25% quadrant for end-of-course exam, ACT, strength of diploma, and graduation rate. Last year, those percentages were the same. The difference is that If you notice on EOC, it also has a component called student progress. So that is a 12.5 and 12.5 percentage that's divided among those two. So, in addition to these changes, the letter grade scale also shifted. So you see in 2017 that letter grade scale and compared to 2018. And you might ask, why is the scale wider for the A school system? And it's because the formula has changed so drastically that it will be increasingly more difficult to achieve that status. So let's look at the change in student point values from last year to this year. The student advanced category stayed the same. But if you recall last year, the bar was set at basic. This year, that bar for that A is set at mastery.
Yeah.
That is a huge change for students to achieve. Notice that the categories of approaching basic and unsatisfactory remain at 0. Okay? Student progress. There are 2 ways that a student would achieve their student progress. The first is a more simple division formula. So teachers will get a growth score for their students. And let's just use an example. Let's make it simple. Let's make the math simple. If the student has to achieve mastery by the end of the 8th grade, and that student is 40 points away from mastery, those points are divided evenly among grade levels. We all know that that's a misnomer. Students do not achieve on a direct continuum along that line. However, the second way is value added. This is when the students are compared to their peers based upon similar characteristics. So if you notice below basic how those point values are achieved, and above, if they're at mastery, they're achieved differently. If a student retains advanced, the student achieves the maximum number of points. This is a whole new formula. It's different for kids. It's different for teachers. Other major changes. The bar used to be 80% for graduation rate. That rate has changed. So the new bar is at 90%. I've given you the index formula calculations just so that you can see you're incentivized above that 90% mark. So the big picture to keep in mind is that the graduation rate needs to be above 90% for that maximum number. ACT. All of you are very familiar with ACT. The bar used to be 18 for the student to achieve those 100 points. That bar has changed to 21. And you see that not only does the bar change to 21, but it's increasingly more difficult to achieve the maximum number of points as well. So I just chose 24 as a benchmark because that is something that many students hope to achieve for TOPS recognition. So you see the points and the difference between 2017 and 2018 in that chart. In addition, the credit accumulation index. Last year, it was set at 5 credits by the end of the 9th grade year. This year, those credits have increased to 6 credits, meaning it's more difficult for the student to achieve those 100 points. So what does all this mean? Last year, under the A formula, we were an A. Our teachers are working extremely hard. And based upon calculations that we have done, if we were still under the old formula, that's where we would be, because our teachers are achieving that mark. But the unknown is, what does the new formula bring us? That's next Thursday. So we will get results coming next Thursday, so look for an email from me on that accord. So what is our action plan? As always, we're looking at curriculum, making sure that we are choosing resources that align not only to this measure, but to all of the measures that students need to be successful in life, whether it's career, college. We want to really equip them with all of those foundational skills, regardless of the path that they choose. We're going into classrooms, doing learning walks to ensure that the teachers are using the correct instructional methods and offering them support. You have heard us talk about the professional development that we're providing to our teachers over the course of the summer or ongoing, be it through our Boost Academy or the professional development that we do during the school day, after the school day, summer, weekends. Whenever we can get the teachers to come, we're offering different courses for them. And lastly, we're trying to unpack the standards to make sure that our teachers have a firm understanding of what it is that the students are expected to achieve. But I don't want to end here just with all of the changes. I want to bring you some good news. We had 2 rollouts recently, and we're going to start with our early childhood network. So let me remind you, we have 23 of our schools included in our network, 41 child care centers, 3 Head Starts, and 2 early Head Starts. And today, the state released some great results. So of our schools, 9 out of 80 statewide achieved that excellent status. And that excellent status is based upon a measure that's used nationally and internationally. So this is a pretty difficult measure and achievement for our schools. Otherwise, there were top gain schools recognized, so 2 of our child care centers achieved that status, and then honor roll, our birth to age 3. 15 child care centers and 1 early Head Start achieved that status. So I would like to give a shout out to Beth Lane and the entire early childhood team and teachers for the work that they are doing, because to start students on their journey at this early age is monumental. And if you have not visited an early childhood classroom, you need to do so, because those teachers barely have 20 minutes that they can just breathe, that they're not providing education for our earliest students. Another shout out that I would like to end tonight with is our ACT. That is a standard that our community and all of us recognize as being a national standard. Regardless of what other changes happen, we can always count on ACT as being a steady landmark. So last year, we were ranked as number 1. This year, based upon the rankings, we are ranked as number 2. Last year, our ranking was 22.0 for our ACT composite scale, but that does not alarm me, because if you look at our top 10 list, and I am going to use that tonight. I often do not like to call out schools by name, but I think it's very important, because when you compare districts and you add up all of those numbers under student count, you will see that we are really in a league of our own there, because all of those other districts are testing a very small number of students. So it's difficult to always make an equal comparison. So let's break it down by high school. So I just commented that Zachary was number 1. Zachary has 1 high school. So when I took out all of the magnet schools, all the selective admission, all of the charter schools, I was left with traditional public high schools like we know and have in our district. And you will see this top 10 list. And I'm going to give a shout out to Mandeville High, Fontainebleau High, North Shore High, and Lakeshore High for traditional public high schools that are doing the job. And I thank you.
All All right, we're going to queue up for questions,
Sure.
but before we do, I want to say, Dr. Sanford, I know that our students and our teachers are really working hard, and the accountability score is a moving target, and it's difficult to know exactly what we're working with. But I'm very proud of our teachers and students, and I'm very proud that we have an action plan and a plan for what we're going to do. So let's see what other board members would like to say. Mr. Nation, and we'll queue up for other, could you? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, all right, Mr. Nation, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Sanford, and for a great report as always. And it is frustrating that, the goalpost keeps getting moved. Those of us that up here and in the audience that work in business, we can't conduct our businesses, with moving goalposts, and we're constantly fussing at either the state legislature or Congress for regulations and changing regulations, and just tell us what the rules are and we'll play the game. So I hope our legislators in Baton Rouge will think hard about that for our public schools as well, that we can't run this business of the public school system with constantly changing regulations. But having said that, there's no doubt in my mind, none whatsoever, that whatever the rules are, this school system will rise to the occasion, because we've got great folks and great minds like yourself and Mrs. Lane and all those in our system. So there's no doubt in my mind that we will continue to be on top. And proof is in this early childhood metric. I mean, we've got 9 out of 80 excellent schools statewide, and you say that's a tough standard. I mean, that's the foundation for what's going to be coming through our school system in the coming years, but also shows me currently that we are continue to do what we always do, to be the best. And I've said this publicly many times, it's nice to be number 1 in Louisiana. That's okay. We compete nationally, and that's where I want us to continue, as you do, focus our attention. So with that in mind, has the national ACT score, average or what have you, has that been released yet, or is it,
I have not seen it yet.
Okay. I'd be curious, is that number, if you can, maybe we can talk offline about that as well. So it's also worth noting, as we've said many times with ACT, that Louisiana is one of the few states that has all juniors, every junior literally, take the ACT. So to me, that also says something for what we do here in this parish. So again, thank you for all the
Dr.
hard work
Sanford,
you do.
let me help you out here. That national ACT for 2018 was 20.9.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Foltz.
So
I
we
did
were-
not look
we
it
were
up
still
before I
above-
walked
So
in.
we're still above the national
Above
average.
the national average
Thank you.
again, and I think that's a slight decrease as well, so that's what it is.
So, thank you, Mr. Foles. Well, that, again, only proves my point that for those of the naysayers, even within our own parish, about this school system, that said, well, it's nice to be top in Louisiana, but what's that saying? Well, we're the best in the nation. We're among the best in the nation. So, anyway, thank you again, Dr. Sanford.
Welcome.
Well said, Mr. Nation. Board members, if you'd like to speak, if you hit the request button, Ms. Campbell has the list here, and I'll call your name through that list. So that being said, Mr. Derman.
I just pushed my button twice, so I didn't know if you got me the first time. Excuse me. Dr. Sanford, one of my questions is directed towards the ACT and the change in the, from the 2017 standard to the 2018.
It's okay. It's all right.
So if somebody scores less than 18 on ACT,
They get 0 points in school accountability.
so am I missing something? Isn't the technical college tops awarded at 17?
All of those have slightly increased, but students can still enter into technical college with an ACT of 18. The reason that they give of raising that bar is because of college admission. Many of the colleges have gotten on board that students who fall below the benchmark have to take a remedial course before they can take the actual college course in, say, English or math, if their score is below a certain benchmark.
Okay. I'm just curious if, everybody look, I went to college. a lot of people I work with didn't. And I have a lot of friends that have children with extremely high student loan debt that is at 10 or 12% interest rate, that is like paying for a second house when they come out of college if they get a degree. And it doesn't seem fair that we penalize our teachers, our school systems, and then try to force children into areas that maybe they don't fit the best as a way of trying to validate what they do know and what they do like in a system along the way, as opposed to the way this education system is going. And I'm frustrated. I mean, when a child gets out of college, they could have a $200,000 debt and not be any better off than when they went there as far as the job application in which they're going to seek. I just, like Mr. Nation said, he talked about our legislature and everybody else. I mean, I think I know what we're doing is the right thing in educating every child every day, and we're not just about a test score. Somebody else needs to step up and realize that we are gonna need people that work on our air conditioners, that people work on our plumbing, they fix our cars, they do everything that a lot of us can't do. And I don't think this is the right way about going about it. I feel frustrated. I really do.
And Mr. Derman, I understand your frustration, and that's why, as a school system, we're putting so many of our dollars and resources into CTE, because we believe that it's equally valued, that students can exit high school with some kind of credential that will allow them to go directly into the workforce if they so choose. And a prime example of that is that welding program at Fountainblue High School. You've seen them here and all of their accolades that they're achieving. And in conversation with that particular teacher just 2 weeks ago, he has students that enter directly into the workforce with a high school diploma and additional training, not a college degree, but additional training, making anywhere from $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and $60,000.
Absolutely, and that's my point. And I'm not. I understand the standards that are set by Bessie and what we have to do because we're mandated by that. I'm just saying, if our general population doesn't realize what's going on and what's going to happen to our community and to our society 20 years from now, this is what's going to happen. We're going to be forced into a cubbyhole. And I just think that people need to wake up. And I don't know, that's all. I appreciate everything that all of our school system does. I truly do. I know our teachers are working hard, and they're working harder now than they ever have to try to meet these standards. I just think it's unrealistic. I think it's unfair, and I think it's ridiculous. That's what I think. Thank you.
Mr. Hennigan.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Dr. Sanford, thank you. Great presentation, nice summary. Can we talk a little bit about the credit accumulation index?
Yes.
A little bit? So,
Yes.
to go from 5 credits to 6 credits, what would someone have to do typically?
The student, typically, if they're entering high school with no Carnegie units having earned in 8th grade, we traditionally offer a 7-period day. So that means that that student could only fail, if you will, 1 course.
Okay.
But if the student comes in with 8th grade credits, then they have more flexibility. We're doing pretty well in DCAI. It's one of our strongest indicators. So
Okay.
I'm very confident in that indicator.
Okay, because one of the things I noticed, to go from 5 points to 6 credits, 5 credits, it's 50 points.
Yes, it is.
Huge.
Huge.
And you compare that against the measure that I put most of my weight behind, which is the ACT score. If you raise your ACT score by 3 points, which is a pretty good jump, that's worth 10 points. So if I were gaming the system, I would spend all my time on that extra DCI point.
Which is why we've expanded the number of high school credits on the junior high campus, because we want students to enter into high school with, a little buffer.
Okay. Another way is not failing any student. We thought about that, just. Seems to work. Graduate everyone and not fail anyone. I think we'd clean up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting observations, Mr. Hennigan. Mr. Betancourt. Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you, Mrs. Hines. To dovetail a little bit about what Mr. Derman said about the fairness, I don't think Bessie and our still unqualified state superintendent are interested in being fair to public education at all. And maybe they should build in, just like he got in on a waiver, maybe they should build in some waivers for some of our students, If it's good for him, it ought to be good for some of our students. What I wanted to ask you, though, a lot, like our ACT went down by, I think, 0.3 of a point from last year. Did you see that across the board?
Yes.
As a whole?
Yes.
So was there a change, I guess, in the ACT or something?
Yes. Overall, the ACT has embedded different item analysis being done. They have different types of questions. I believe that some of those items directly align with national standards.
Okay. All right, thank y'all, and I thank y'all for the job that you're doing. This is almost like y'all are playing, that little game where the thing pops up and you gotta whack it with the hammer, what's it called, whack-a-mole? They keep throwing all this stuff at us, and then we're constantly doing that. So I applaud y'all for trying to keep up. Thank you.
It's our teachers.
And Mr. Betancourt, I'll remind you that we are paying for ACT prep courses in our schools and providing
Yes.
those for our
Would
students.
you like me to speak to that?
Sure, go ahead.
For ACT, we are offering courses for ACT prep as a Carnegie Unit course in some of our high schools. We have ACT boot camps. We have purchased ACT aligned materials and provided professional development for our teachers. And we are very strategically tracking ACT progress. In fact, the particular vendor that we have used traditionally, we are looking very hard to see if that is the most strategic vendor that we should choose. And we're dedicating quite a number of dollars to that endeavor.
And I know, board member, you've heard me say this, and Regina and I talk about it. Anytime I do a presentation to any community group, Rotary, Kiwanis, Business Council, any of those, the number one slide that resonates the most with any of them is our ACT success. So not only is it important to us in the state, it's also important to us in our community, and we certainly continue to put a lot of effort on that and see results for that. But it is really something that resonates across this community, because everyone has either had a student or themselves has had to take it and knows that it is a nationally known comparison.
Thank you, Mr. Foss. Thank you, Dr. Sanford.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting tonight. It was a brief meeting, but we went over some important topics, and I appreciate everyone being here for that. The Business Affairs meeting will begin in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We'll call this November 1st, All Saints Day meeting of the Business and Affairs Administrative Committee to order. And it's a pleasure to have Mrs. Campbell back with us tonight. Yeah. And if you would call the roll, please, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Hennigan. Here. Mrs. Heinz. Here. Mr. Derman. Here. Mr. Loop. Here. Mr. Harrell. Here. Mr. Nation.
Here.
Mr. Jeter.
Here.
Mrs. Seeley.
Present.
Mrs. Drucker. Mr. Betancourt.
Here.
Oops, hold on just a second. Mr. Womack? Here. Mr. Hersey? Here. Mrs. Mullet? Mr. Kuzan? Here. Mrs. Bellisario?
Okay. As the invocation and pledge were said at our previous committee meeting, they'll be dispensed with here. Is there anyone committee members would like to recognize tonight? All right, not seeing anyone. There were no persons requesting time on our agenda, so we'll move on to the approval of the minutes for our committee meeting held in October, on October 4th, 2018. Is there a motion to accept? Mr. Womack moves to, Mrs. Seeley seconds. Any discussion? All right, we'll open the floor
Hold
for
on.
voting. Oh,
It's not. Mrs. Seeley, oh, there he is. Sorry.
there we go.
Okay.
All right. The floor is now open for voting. If committee members would vote. All right. Looks like everyone has voted. And the motion carries 14 to nothing. So we'll move on now to consideration of a resolution for Mealy Printing to participate in the Industrial Tax Exemption Program, ITEP, for a $1.225 million project in new equipment and construction here in Covington. And I would like to sponsor this resolution, so I move that we adopt the resolution. Is there a second? Mrs. Mullet, second. So, motion's been moved and adopted, and now we'll turn to Mr. Javia.
Thank you, Mr. Nation. Board members, good evening. Just a little background, then I'm gonna turn it over to the real expert in this, and that's Ms. Prevost. But on October the 11th, we placed at your seat information regarding the ITEP tax exemption program. We put at your table the policy that this board approved, some program guidelines, the application, state rules effective July 1, and another set for July 24th, 2016. The other ones was for 2018. Louisiana Economic Development Notice of Action Form, and a sample board resolution under the new ITEP rules, and a sample board resolution under the old ITEP rules. In addition to that, I did email to all of you a financial analysis compiled by Ms. Prevost. And so what we were trying to do is to provide you with all the information, hopefully, that you needed to make an informed decision tonight. And again, Ms. Prevost is here if you have any questions regarding that. I also understand that Mr. Ambo, the consultant for Mealy Printing, is also here. Okay?
Welcome, Mr. Ambo. Mrs. Prevost, anything you would like to add? Any opening comments you have?
On this, did you want me to go over the analysis?
Please.
Okay. As Mr. Jabby said, this project is approximately $1.2 million of new construction and equipment for Mealy Printing, an existing business. The project's estimated life is expected to be 12 years. Their advance notification with Louisiana Economic Development was filed March 5th, 2018. By this filing date, they are allowed to choose which rules they fall under. We have what we call old rules. Those fall for the period June 24, 16 through June 30, 2018. And then there's new rules that fall after July 1st of 2018. The vendor is allowed to pick which set of rules they want to fall under based on the date he filed his application. So Mealy Printing selected the old rules. With these rules, you're allowed a potential 8-year ITEP, 5 years at 100%, and a renewal of 3 years at 80%. Under these rules, the school board would vote yes or no, but they also must set the percentage. Under the guidelines developed by the school board, the max ITEP that would be allowed is 80%. Also, we would allow a renewal at 80% for the additional 3 years, so a total of 8 years at 80%. We did prepare a financial analysis of this project. The loss of property tax revenue by granting an 80% ITEP for 8 years is $45,353, or approximately $5,000 per year. The revenue to be gained from the project for the school board for the 12-year life of the project is $574,000 for sales tax, $21,290 for use tax, and $22,700 for property tax net of the ITEP. That is a total gain in revenue of $618,000. This project meets all guidelines and criteria as set by the school board and the state, and the net proposed financial gain for this project for the school board would be $572,782.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Rambo, we do welcome you, and if you would like to say anything, we certainly welcome your comments.
Thank you, and thank you, Board. I've spoken to you several times already about this project. I don't have anything new to add. I would certainly like to thank Ms. Prevost and Mr. Javier for their help getting this thing together and being expeditious about it. There is an issue regarding the approval of this and getting it done in time that if Mealy pays the taxes, they cannot get the exemption. And of course, that bill's coming out very soon, so it's an expeditious matter. So again, I don't really have anything to add. This program was initially created to attract large businesses to the state, which it did. We have an amazing industrial corridor in this state because of it. Since then, it has been used and deployed as a means to attract and retain businesses, both large and small. I started my company, I spent 10 years with the Ascension Parish Assessor's Office, and I started my company on the basis of one simple idea. I saw the large corporations be able to take advantage of all kinds of tax credits, tax abatements, tax advantages, all kinds of stuff. And small business owners, the local Louisiana-owned business owners got locked out of everything because it was cumbersome and difficult and expensive. Most firms charge six-figure fees to do these things, which, as you can imagine, is cost prohibitive for a small business owner. That's the entire basis of my business model. I believe in small business, and I believe that communities are well served by sending messages to their small business owners, existing and that they may attract, that they are excited and willing to have them just as much as they're excited about big projects coming in. Every community says, oh, sure, we'd love to have IBM and whoever else come to town, but what about those people that are doing business all the time and they're paying taxes all the time and supporting their local community? Mealy Printing is one of those organizations. So I just have you ask that you consider that in your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Rambo.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hannigan.
Thank you. I guess I have a couple questions. First is to Mr. Javia. When we had talked last time, I think the board was gonna come up with a process and a procedure, and I expected to actually talk about the process before we brought this before us. Is there a reason that we have to do this now?
I think Mr. Ambo said that in his presentation. Tax bill is coming out next month. Once they pay their taxes, they're not eligible for this exemption.
Ever again? I mean, that's it?
I don't say ever again, but for the present time, for this coming year, it would be. We
Yeah, but-
presented the guidelines to you on October the 11th.
Yeah,
gave
no, there were
everything.
guidelines.
We
It was a process that I was looking for. I expected we'd talk about that. I guess maybe I could ask Mr. Rambo, has the equipment been installed?
Mr. Ambo.
Ambo,
Call
sorry.
Mr. Rambo, by the way.
Sorry, Freudian slip, you look like a bodybuilder.
So at this point, what has happened, Mr. Hannigan, is that ordinarily a company applies for the application at the onset of the project or even beforehand, right? And then the project proceeds and then there are certain procedures that happen. Because the governor changed the rules in July of 2016, no one knew what to do or how to apply for these, including the Louisiana Economic Development Department. So you know, as a consultant, I would say, what should we do now? We don't know, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. So we're a little bit behind the procedures on this.
So the equipment's in place?
So it is all complete now. So our project completion date was October 1st. and it is completed. And we've now filed our application. We got some feedback on that. We're gonna fix some of those problems. It's gonna be a little bit less than the number that you guys have been given. And then from that, we'll file what's called an affidavit of final cost and a project completion report, et cetera, to get the final. So we've been preliminarily approved. Once we have your designation, the sheriff, the city, as well as the parish council, we'll take those will all go to the governor, and then the governor gives final approval for those things. And they have a board that they can either deny or grant, which as long as things, of course, follow all the rules, they generally just, they'll go with your recommendation, of course.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hennigan. Mr. Derman?
Thank you. Could, Ms. Prevost, I think you kind of gave us the analysis of what the dollar value may be, but what are some of the other stipulations that enter into this as far as employment, jobs, construction, whatever? Can you kind of expand upon that just slightly for us?
Yeah, a requirement is that you must create jobs, and with this project, the preliminary information they gave us was 5 employees. That's the main criteria of the
Okay.
project. It has to be new construction. Mr. Ambo maybe could address that further.
Okay.
what the criteria
So there's other economical impacts that could occur
That's
if
correct.
these employees are non-residents, and I'm not just using, maybe for future considerations of other businesses that may come in, that they're actually bringing in outside
That's correct.
personnel into our community, which then enhances maybe not what's in the analysis, but the general outcome
That's
of,
correct.
of a new project, so to speak.
In our application, we ask how many of the new employees are St. Tammany residents, so that will tell us the impact as far as the analysis. We also ask about if they use local vendors, what percentage of the project, and they did answer all those questions. So they're looking at adding about $150,000 payroll for those 5 people. 4 of the 5 are St. Tammany residents.
Okay, and with this type of operation, there is sales, correct? So does this include sales tax or just property tax, or
Yeah,
how
the
is
sales
that?
tax was $574 over the 12-year period.
Okay,
So, and that, based on the current annual sales that I looked at, his current annual sales were about 7.8 million. So, with the additional that they projected, that looks like to me about a 30% increase from this project, and Mr. Ambo could probably address that, or Mr.
in
Miller.
addition to the 500?
In addition to what we've already receiving.
Okay. And our net cost, for lack of better terminology, is 45,000 and change, is that?
That's correct, that's the loss of revenue,
Okay.
but the gain is 572 net.
That's a pretty good roll of the dice, sounds like to me, but anyway. Okay, I appreciate the additional information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Derman. Mrs. Bellisario?
Thank you. Since this is our first request, I do have a couple questions. First, have they already been to the parish government and the sheriff's office, or is that coming up?
I don't know the answer to that.
The
Mr.
parish,
Rambo could
they have
answer.
talked to the parish, I think they're in the process.
Let him, I'll tell you.
I'll be
can
glad
answer
to
that.
tell you, we have met with the sheriff, and I'm gonna speak with them, for them. They've granted us their approval. We're just, they're waiting for all the rest, because their resolution has to include verbiage from the other resolutions. So we have not met with the city. The parish council is asking us for approvals from everyone else. I don't know why, but I still haven't addressed that with them. That's not part of the process, it's not part of the laws. I don't understand why they're asking for that, but I haven't addressed that with them yet, so.
And the sheriff just gave you verbal approval?
So we've met with them. He's 100% behind us, and we're just following the rest of the procedures now, so. And again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but
Okay.
you can call him and
Does-
ask him.
Does the sheriff have to give you written approval? Let me
Yes,
phrase it that way.
they do a resolution as well that will be
Okay.
included in our package that will go to the governor.
But you haven't gotten it yet?
Yes, ma'am, that's
Okay.
true.
I kind of would like to point out that this $618,000 gain is projected, it is proposed, it's not a guarantee. And I don't like to keep hearing, this is what we're going to get, because it's it's a roll of the dice, like Mr. Dearman said. And my third question is, when this board votes, does it have to be unanimous, or is it just a majority vote?
It's the normal
Normal
vote for any resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bellisario. Mr. Bettencourt.
Thank you, Mr. Nation. You usually estimate things pretty conservatively. You broke down our loss a little over 45, and you basically said about $5,000 a year. The gain over 8 years would break down to somewhere over, a little over $71,000 a year if you divide that 572. Since you normally do conservative figures, it could possibly be more than that. Would that be?
These, just to make this clear, these figures are coming from Mealy Printing. It's in their application. So they're providing this information to me. So I use the numbers they're projecting on their project.
Okay, all right, Mr. Ando. Are these figures that you provided, are those on the conservative side, or are y'all, is that pie in the sky, or what?
Right. That's a very good question. So what Mr. Mealy has done for years with this particular piece of business, this is wide format printing, so banners and great big things, right? He's had to farm that out. That's gone out of state for years. And it's been a growing business for him with existing and new customers. And of course, he had to send it out, and that's squeezing his margin. So now he can do it in-house. So that was based upon the business he's already doing in that space, but had to send elsewhere. So of course, there's a possibility that that even grows greater. Whenever more people around here know that it's available locally rather than having to go out of state as well. I think it was a firm in Alabama he was using, if I recall. But.
Okay. And a while back, there was something said about, with Mealy, like all of their profits or whatever, or were centrally located or whatever in Covington.
Well, because they are a locally based business.
You've got an office like in Baton Rouge. I mean, I would think whatever goes on in Baton Rouge or the parish, East Baton Rouge, would deal with that money and
all
stuff.
of his business is conducted here, and that business comes from all over the state and the region. So he is the largest printer in the state of Louisiana. He handles about 70% of all the governmental printing in the entire state. From every parish and every local government. I think you guys probably use them as well, as a lot of people do in the state. And they're the big dog, and they're right here in Covington. So all of those sales dollars are taxed and benefit this particular community. So.
Okay. Well, I kind of feel like what Mr. Derman said, that seems like a pretty good trade-off. So I would be inclined to favor that unless I hear something different. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bettencourt. Mr. Derman.
Thank you. Ms. Prevost, again, just a clarification. We're talking about a 5-year exemption, because I heard you said 8 years, but this is 5 years, and we would have to reapprove additional. No?
No,
Okay.
the economic development does it. So once we do this, they'll give them 5 years, they will look at it again in the 3, and they renew it. So this basically kicks it off.
But if they don't meet the standards or the representations that's been placed before us tonight,
Right.
Do we have an opportunity to address the failure of this proposal in 5 years? To them?
I think we can look at it annually. Like he said, the proposal, the rules are a little, there's not a whole
Fuzzy.
lot of clarity out there. But from what I read and from what we put in our guidelines, we analyze this every year, and we look and see if they're meeting their benchmarks.
Okay, it's an annual assessment.
It's an annual for us. That's in our guidelines, so.
Okay. All right, I think that makes me feel a lot better.
Mr. Dermott, if I may add, what's in place now is 10,000% more oversight than ever was. For decades, this program was granted carte blanche. Everybody got it. There were no questions asked. There was never any follow-up in terms of the jobs, in terms of the projects, in terms of even what was included. So I was with the Ascension Parish Assessor's Office for 10 years, and I would look at these contracts. There were shrubs, and I mean, you'd be amazed at the kind of stuff was in there that they were getting exemptions from. They've already specifically told us to take out 2 planters that Mr. Mealy put up front. That's part of the new office space that he did, which again, I thought was fine, but they're like, boom, those are out. And all these other checks and balances in place, all brand new, putting the power in you guys' hands, all brand new. So the oversight is like a whole bunch from literally zero, like no oversight at all before. So it's a much greater improvement that puts the power in your hands.
Okay, and then I want to revert to something that we deal with, and that's our policies. And that if these policies, we have the ability to change them as we see fit. So here again, in regarding to this document that we're utilizing as an application and a process, that is still subject to us reevaluating and changing or adapting it to if we find something that isn't to our liking. Is that a good understanding or a good way of expressing it?
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
Yes, sir. You adopt your approved policies and you can change and adopt anytime.
Because, I mean, like you're saying, this is all brand new to everybody, and I mean, it's pretty complicated for a school board to review and deal with, and no one else is in front of us as this, especially here in St. Tammany. We're the lead horse here, so I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think we have done, well, not we, but Terry has done a great job in trying to evaluate every component and dot every I and cross every T, and it still may not be perfect, but I think it's a heck of a start. But the fact that we get to review this on an annual basis and submit, our perception of how things are going, I think is important. So I'm good with that, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Derman. Mrs. Seeley.
Thank you. I'd first like to make a statement. Evidently, your congratulations on being a prosperous business in our area. The second is, I have a question. How many employees do you have at this moment?
I'm Mr. Mealy's representative with A&T Consultants, but Mr. Mealy has over 100 now here locally.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Seeley. Mr. Harrell.
There's an old saying that nothing is definite except death and taxes and tax exemptions. If this is a solid thing, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's a well-deserved incentive to bring it industry and to St. Tammany. The payback is marvelous, so I would urge everybody to vote for it and make it unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. Mr. Kuzan.
Yes, I too think it's a wonderful project. There's only one question that kind of bothers me a little bit, and that is that no other agency has taken any action, as far as to get out front like we're doing. I know you said you had a verbal commitment from the sheriff, but the city of Covington, and have you met with these people, and what type of response did you get from them?
So again, the parish is echoing your sentiments. Well, we'll just wait to see what everybody else does. Somebody has to get this thing done. So again, we met with the sheriff. They gave us their approval, and they said, oh, hold on, we need these others' approvals to include in our approval. So get those and then come back to us. We said, great, we'll go to work on that in that order. Now, that was their interpretation. The Louisiana Economic Development doesn't say that's the case, and I've confirmed that with them. But we're not going to argue with them, especially since they're an ally with us here. So somebody's got to be first, and I think the procedures put together here are really good. I've done this in several of the other parishes, and I've kind of had to be the tip of the spear in every parish I've been to. Again, what Mr. Dearman said, you're faced with dealing with a thing that's really way off your radar, not in your wheelhouse, not your specialty. Just as if I were sitting in your spot, I would have no idea, because education's not my place. But so yes, so you guys will be the first. If you so choose, which we're asking, and that'll get the ball moving. And as you get this program going further, hopefully it will be an economic engine for the parish anyway, that you'll attract some other businesses and help other businesses decide to stay here rather than go elsewhere because other parishes would offer it.
Okay, And the time element you said was,
So the tax bills will be going out real soon. I don't know exactly when St. Tammany's does. Each assessor has that decision to make on their own. There are some parishes in Louisiana that have already sent theirs, and others won't come out for like even like the first week in December. They're due January 1. And if Mr. Mealy pays the taxes without this exemption, it's null and void, and there's no opportunity to go back and get it. We lose it for the whole thing, so.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzan. Mrs. Bellisario.
Yeah, I'm still just a little confused on the process. So the sheriff said he's waiting until you get the others.
Their interpretation from their legal counsel was that they needed everyone else's exhibit to include with their exhibit. Their exhibit's called Exhibit B, and the other one's an A, and that was their interpretation.
Okay.
I've been told by Louisiana Economic Development that that's not the case.
Okay. And concerning the parish government, are you talking to the administration or are you
Mrs.
talking?
Bellisario, I'm going to stop you just a second. Mr. Ambo, let's stick with our process.
I need to understand this, Michael.
Well, it's really not germane to what we're doing, what the parish council does, or what the other agencies do.
It is very germane to how I vote tonight. As I was starting to say, do you deal with the parish council or the administration, or do you have to get permission from both?
We have to get approval from the council, from the parish council, the city council, this board, and the sheriff.
Okay.
And so any of the major taxing bodies in every parish have the opportunity. Not everybody that has a millage, but the major taxing bodies, which is always going to be education, law enforcement, the parish itself, and then if it's in the city limits. Other than that, I don't know of any opportunity where there's anyone else involved in the process.
And what did you say at the end of 5 years that someone else, the Louisiana something council, decides whether to extend it?
So there is a Commerce and Industry Board that will take this information from LED and then pass it on to the governor, and they have an approval process as well that you are welcome to go to and speak your piece. Absolutely. And without objection, as long as things are followed, that they will approve for the following, first time and for the following, used to be 5 years, now 3 years, and it's going to be 5 years again, if you can keep up with all that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bellisario. Before I open it up to the public, I do want to, since I sponsored the resolution, I did that not just to get it on the floor, but I do firmly believe in anything we can do to support our businesses. You know, we all live together in these parishes. And, yeah, and Mr. Dermer's right. This is something that's a little out of our wheelhouse, so to speak, in terms of approving tax exemptions. But I, for one, think there's no reason why not to support our local businesses. And the great relationship that Mr. Foltz has built with our business community over the past 8 years of his tenure as our superintendent will only be further strengthened by this board supporting, showing firm support for our business community, who are the job creators and the tax, and provide the taxes. Yes, it's a $45,000 loss in property tax, but based on Terry's figures, and I've seen the financial analysis, and as I said to Mr. Foltz, this is what sets us apart in the St. Tammany Parish School System. It's great folks like Terry and the financial analysis that we did, because we were very transparent. We're saying, we could have come up and said, no, we're not going to approve it, and knowing that we would get a gain, and only approve, only publish the ones that we're going to show a loss to try to, to game the system, or if that, there may be a better expression for that, but so this depoliticizes it, because I've seen the guidelines that you all came up with. So we're not playing favorites with this company or that company. It's all based on the numbers. It's all based on, decision basis. So I certainly would hope, as Mr. Harrell says, we would all support this unanimously, that the goodwill that we will, and goodwill for businesses, that is an actual accounting figure for some businesses is goodwill. I mean, you can't actually show a loss if you have a loss of goodwill. And we are a business in this parish, as Mr. Foltz reminds the community all the time. We're the largest business in this parish, and we certainly want to increase the value of our goodwill. And we already have tremendous goodwill with this community to begin with, but what we do here tonight and what we will do with these, the ones that'll come before us, we'll examine them each on a case-by-case basis. Will certainly increase the goodwill, but, so I would hope we would all support this unanimously. All right? Now I would open it up to the public. Anybody from the public that would like to speak? Okay? Come forward. Please state your name and your place of residence for the record.
Lee Barrios. I live in Abita Springs. I'm a retired teacher, and evidently nobody noticed that I'm also running for the school board. So thank you. I'm not a rocket scientist when it comes to finances or numbers of any kind, but I have been sold a used car before, actually several times, and I've been through that process. And this reminds me of that. I got a copy through a public records request of your proposed policy, which I continue to have an issue with you're not sharing on your agenda the things that you're going to discuss at the meetings. But I got a copy. I sent it off to a couple of people in other parts of the state who are also involved in discussing this with their school boards and communities. And the response from one was, wow, this is the strictest policy that I've seen. And then he said, but the question is, will they actually follow it? I thought that was interesting. Well, they wrote it. Why wouldn't they follow it? I don't think you're following it from my reading. It is a pretty strict and a pretty good policy. I've read policies that other districts have set up, like the Orleans Parish, which is amazing. They actually have a good policy, too. I do not for the life of me see how the school board should be in the economic development business. Our income and expenses are based on taxes, purely taxes. We don't make a profit. We don't sell anything. This is a company, and it's not just this company. Bottom line for me is I don't understand why the school board, here's an opportunity the governor and the state have given everybody in the state to have a say in these tax exemptions. It's been a huge issue with our state income. For years, we've had budget issues, and it's. I have a couple of questions about this project. It has been completed. Orleans Parish requires that any requests not have been actually carried out. That makes sense because if you need this tax exemption in order to do this, traditionally, or at least according to the book, these tax exemptions are given to either get a new business into the state or to prevent a business from going under or to keep its head above water. That's not the case here. The numbers that are thrown out there, again, it's like, to me, a used car salesman is $71,000 a year, but how much of that benefits the school system? It's like you're making it sound like we're getting this money back. We're giving money away, that's for sure. But what are we actually getting back? These 5 employees, according to their application, it looks to me like they were strictly for the building and material costs, which the job has already been done. That's 5 new. The largest part of the cost of this project was for machinery and equipment, $875,000, and there's no jobs involved with that, no jobs involved with labor and engineering, so those are ongoing jobs. So I'm not sure I understand how these new jobs can be so highly figured into approving this. I just think that the public hasn't had an opportunity. Again, Orleans Parish is going to have public hearings before they approve, because there is a timeline that the state, this thing about we have to pay our taxes next week, and so then it's a dead deal. I don't get any of that from my readings and study of this new ITEP provision. None of this matches up. So I would hope that you all would look into this further. It's also not a fact that all 3 entities have to approve this. Each entity can individually decide that they're going to give up this money or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Barrios. I think I saw another hand go up. Yes, sir. Again, please state your name and place of residence for the record.
I'm James Bro, City of Slidell. District 13. I'm all pro-business. I think that the small businesses are lifeblood of our community. What concerns me is this is a first-time thing, and I want to make sure we get this one right, because once we decide this, we set a precedent for any other company that is also looking for tax exemptions. So I have a few questions to start with. When asked $571,000 in increased tax coming, when I buy something on Amazon, they charge me tax, and I send that tax money to Amazon. And that tax money comes back to my communities to support my local community. So when he said $71,000, and he says, all of that money is coming back to St. Tammany, well, is that money going to stay here, or does it have to go back to the local communities, like Amazon? They'll pay the tax here, but how much of it will stay here? So I need to know if that figure is our local state tax, local revenue, or is that his total revenue? That's number one. Number two.
All right, well, let's take that question. Mrs. Prevost or Mr. Ambo, if you'd like. Do you
Mr.
wanna
Ambo provided me the figures, so he may want to address that.
Okay.
I'll be glad to answer it. It's, sale happens here in this parish, so the money is in this, it's the sale.
That's the local revenue,
That's local.
Sales locally,
That's local revenue. Right, that's
$571,000.
right. And Ms. Prevost put that number together based upon the sales tax and
Okay,
use tax that this body receives.
As you
So-
mentioned, your major sales are in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and I was just wondering, how many local sales do you have? You're doing $12 million of business in St. Tammany Parish.
Just up the road, a couple blocks up the road. And it's all sales made here, and those sales, the sales and use tax dollars stay here.
Okay, well, that was the first point. And the second point is you can't compare all of that sales, the 10%, with the 45,000, because that 10%, only a small portion of that is actually going toward the school system.
Sir, my number is the 2%, just for the school board.
So
That's
that was
just
the
2%.
2% out of the
Yes, sir.
out of
500,000
Right.
was the 2%.
Those numbers I provided are our portion of,
And that's annually.
well, that was a 12-year, over the 12-year life of the project, the total.
Okay. Again, I just want to make sure that we get all the numbers right and all the facts straight, because I anticipate other people coming through this process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Brogue. All right, not seeing anyone else from the public, we will open the floor for voting. Oh.
Mr. Kuzan, here we go.
All right. All right, motion carries 12 yeas and 2 nays. Scroll down just a little bit. Let me see.
She has to, you have to scroll down.
So we can see the. Okay. All right. Yes, sir. You certainly may.
Just for clarification, and this was approved at a committee, it still has to go before the full board next week?
Oh, absolutely, correct,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just verifying.
Yeah. Thank you for that, that clarification. So there'll be a second vote again next week for the full board, so. All right.
I don't know if that's supposed to be correct, but it's saying 0 not present to vote. And we had someone absent here.
They're not present.
Who's?
That vote is correct. That's how many people are here, 14.
Should that say one person not present to vote? Or
I can't-
is that accurate?
They're not present
Present
at
at
vote.
vote.
They're not, in other words, they're here, but they didn't vote. That's what that means. This person is absent.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Belisario. I mean, Mr. Betancourt. Sorry about that. Bees on my. All right, moving on. This is, all right. We'll move on. Mr. Jabbia, take us home here.
Yes, sir, I will, and I've got to say this because I've heard some comments from people at the podium and talking about getting accurate information out, and there were some statements made tonight that were inaccurate, because on our board agenda was the adoption of the policy. It was publicized, it was a public meeting, and you voted and approved it. So whoever said that is incorrect. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. I want to first give a shout out to a number of people before I get started in the reports. I sent you a report today of kind of what went on this morning and what we were doing. And without the help of Mike, without the help of Steve, Kurt, Jimbo and his crew, we were up and running at 4 o'clock this morning. And Steve and Kurt was at the EOC Center. And just how important that was, that we get a report from a bus driver, because we got the radios, and the bus driver said there's a tree in the road, and there's Dexter Ricardo sitting next to us, and he gets on the phone with Public Works and says, there's a tree in the road over here we know about, and go get it removed. So all that worked so good, hand in hand.
And explain, that was an improvement. I mean, that's
An improvement of what we've done
in the
before,
past,
and this
right.
was a suggestion from Dexter Ricardo, and they work, he and Ms. Brister work very close with us. So I want to give a shout out to these guys, they did a tremendous job. So next up is our monthly maintenance and custodial report. Mr. Williams, his staff is here if you have any questions.
All right, any questions for Mr. Williams? All right, moving on. Risk management.
Kurt Gaspard is here if you have any questions.
And Kurt is actually awake over there after having gotten up at 4 o'clock this morning. Thank you, Kurt, for getting up in the wee hours along with everyone else. Speaking of risk management, and I will echo your comments, you know, that the cooperation that you all showed this morning with, you know, with our EOC folks, and it was outstanding. And so anyway, and good call. So, all right.
Good, thank you. And our monthly.
Any questions? I'm sorry. Okay. All right, monthly transportation report?
Yes, Mr. Alfonso is here if you have any questions.
No, he is asleep, so punch him over there. Any questions for Mr. Alfonso? All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Tipton?
Yes, sir, thank you. Our first item is recommends acceptance of the RISE Learning Center renovations as substantially complete, subject to the architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Folse, STPSB project number P0194.
And okay, Mrs. Seeley moves. Mr. Jeter seconds. All right, any questions or discussions regarding, and of course, Ms. Prevost, if you would like to add any, Ms. Prevost, wow, this really is a long night. I was up at 4 o'clock this morning. Ms. Tipton, anything else from you on this project?
I was going to report later that's very near completion. We're scheduling the final inspections. Some of them are next week.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Mr. Derman?
I don't know, Ms. Sanford neither, or Pete or somebody, how many students is this projected to service? Can somebody
Dr.
reiterate
Sanford,
that?
do you want? We're going to start off the program with probably about 35 to 40 students.
Okay, and we're looking
Yeah,
at.
that's in the fall. We're trying to work on a pilot program with a smaller number for the spring, once we get everything complete.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Derman. Anyone else? All right, any comments or questions from the public? Not seeing any, then we'll open the floor for voting. And motion is adopted unanimously. All right, your construction report, Ms. Tipton.
Yes, sir. I have a short report. At Slidell High, the masonry is complete for the girls' side locker room, and they just received their above ceiling inspection, so they'll start on ceiling work, and they also expect to start on the installation of the ceramic tile. They're having a pre-roofing meeting next week so that we can get the kitchen area roofed in. And as soon as the ground dries from today's rain, and the roof will help, we'll be able to start the underground plumbing for the new kitchen now that they've resolved some of the existing conditions that they ran into. We did receive a final progress set of documents, and we are reviewing them for the Madisonville Elementary Additions project. And at Mandeville High, the culverts have been installed for the limestone parking lot project. Limestone is installed in portions of the new parking lot, and the rest of it is being completed. The documents for the temporary modular classroom buildings for that job are in the process of being bid. And the architects and engineers for the new classroom building are working on the construction documents as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members for Ms. Tipton? All right, thank you, Ms. Tipton.
Thank you.
All right, and we go to Ms. Prevost for
Mr.
business.
Nation, if I could,
Sure.
before that, I think it'd be good, and we'll do this next month, ask Dr. Sanford to give an update on the whole RISE program and how we see implementing this in the spring and then transition into next fall. So we'll do that and put that as part of our agenda, since the building is close to complete now.
Thank you, Mr. Jappy. I mean, Mr. Foles.
Yeah,
Now, that wasn't.
Don't touch
Mrs. Prevost,
The financial report was sent to you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
any
you may have.
questions regarding the financials? All right,
You also received the purchasing report, and Ms. Stevens is here to answer any questions you may have.
any questions for Ms. Stevens? All right, not seeing any. Madam President?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Nation.
Mrs. Prevost, as always.
Yes, thank you. All schools and central office sites will be closed Tuesday, November 6th for the election. Veterans Day program will be November 8th at 6 p.m. here in Covington, here in the atrium. The board meeting will follow the program beginning at 7 p.m. There will be a special board meeting for expulsion appeals. That will be on Thursday, November 15th, and we are going to start that at 5 p.m., correct? Okay. Please remember to check board docs for handouts, for meeting notices and other information, and everyone have a good week.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mrs.
and
Mullet.
go Tigers.
And roll tide.
Go Tigers. Go Tigers.
With no further business to come before the adjournment, before the committee, I declare this meeting adjourned.